Valentinus, also spelled Valentinus, 100 to 160 AD, was the best known and for a time the most successful early Christian Gnostic theologian. He founded a school in Rome. According to Tertullian, Valentinus was a candidate for bishop, but started his own group when another was chosen. Valentinus produced a variety of writings, but only fragments survive, largely those embedded in refuted quotations in the works of his opponents, but not enough to reconstruct his system except in broad outline. He taught that there were three kinds of people: the spiritual, psychical, and material, and that only those of a spiritual nature, his own followers, received the gnosis or knowledge that allowed them to return to the divine pleroma, while those of a psychic nature, ordinary Christians, would attain a lesser form of salvation, and those of a material nature were doomed to perish. Valentinus had a large following, the Valentinians. The Marcosians belonged to the western branch. Valentinus was born in Frebronis in the Nile Delta and educated in Alexandria, an important and metropolitan early Christian center. There, he may have heard the Christian philosopher Basilides, and certainly became conversant with Hellenistic Middle Platonic philosophy and the culture of Hellenized Jews like the great Alexandrian Jewish allegorist and philosopher Philo Judaeus. Clement of Alexandria records that his followers said that Valentinus was a follower of Theodos, and that Theodos in turn was a follower of St. Paul of Tarsus. Valentinus said that Theodos imparted to him the secret wisdom that Paul had taught privately to his inner circle, which Paul publicly referred to in connection with his visionary encounter with the risen Christ, when he received the secret teaching from him. Such esoteric teachings were becoming downplayed in Rome after the mid-2nd century. Valentinus first taught in Alexandria and went to Rome around 136 AD during the pontificate of Pope Hyginus and remained until the pontificate of Pope Anicetus. Valentinus had expected to become a bishop because he was an able man both in genius and eloquence. Being indignant, however, that another obtained the dignity by reason of a claim which confessorship had given him, he broke with the Church of the True Faith. According to a tradition reported in the late 4th century by Epiphanius, he withdrew to Cyprus, where he continued to teach and draw adherents. He died probably about 160 or 161 AD. While Valentinus was alive, he made many disciples, and his system was the most widely diffused of all the forms of Gnosticism, although, as Tertullian remarked, it developed into several different versions, not all of which acknowledged their dependence on him. They affected to disavow their name. Among the more prominent disciples of Valentinus, who, however, did not slavishly follow their master in all his views, were Bardesanus, invariably linked to Valentinus in later references, as well as Heraclion, Ptolemy, and Marcus. Many of the writings of these Gnostics, and a large number of excerpts from the writings of Valentinus, existed only in quotes displayed by their orthodox detractors, until 1945, when the cache of writings at Nag Hammadi revealed a Coptic version of the Gospel of Truth, which is the title of a text that, according to Irenaeus, was the same as the Gospel of Valentinus mentioned by Tertullian in his Adversus Valentinianus. The Christian heresiologists also wrote details about the life of Valentinus, often scurrilous. As mentioned above, Tertullian claimed that Valentinus was a candidate for bishop, after which he turned to heresy in a fit of pique. Epiphanius wrote that Valentinus gave up the true faith after he had suffered a shipwreck in Cyprus and became insane. These descriptions can be reconciled and are not impossible, but few scholars cite these accounts as other than rhetorical insults. Valentinianism. Valentinianism is the name for the school of Gnostic philosophy tracing back to Valentinus. It was one of the major Gnostic movements, having widespread following throughout the Roman Empire and provoking voluminous writings by Christian heresiologists. Notable Valentinians included Heraclian, Ptolemy, Florinius, Marcus, and Exonicus. Valentinus professed to have derived his ideas from Theodas or Theodas, a disciple of St. Paul. Valentinus drew freely on some books of the New Testament. Unlike a great number of other Gnostic systems which are expressly dualist, Valentinus developed a system that was more monistic, albeit expressed in dualistic terms. Cosmology. Valentinian literature described the primal being or Bythos as the beginning of all things, who after ages of silence and contemplation gave rise to other beings by a process of emanation. Of the mid-2nd century thinkers and preachers who were declared heretical by Irenaeus and later mainstream Christians, only Marcion is as outstanding as a personality. The contemporary Orthodox counter to Valentinus was Justin Martyr. Trinity. In the 4th century, Marcellus of Ancyra declared that the idea of the Godhead existing as three hypostases, hidden spiritual realities, came from Plato through the teachings of Valentinus, who is quoted as teaching that God is three hypostases and three prosopa, persons, called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now with the heresy of the Aramaniacs, which has corrupted the Church of God, these then teach three hypostases, just as Valentinus the heresiarch first invented in the book entitled by him On the Three Natures. For he was the first to invent three hypostases and three persons of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he is discovered to have filched this from Hermes and Plato. Since Valentinus had used the term hypostases, his name came up in the Arian disputes in the 4th century. Marcellus of Ancyra, who was a staunch opponent of Arianism, but also denounced the belief in God existing in three hypostases as heretical, and was later condemned for this view, attacked his opponents on the Holy Church by linking them to Valentinus. Valentinus, the leader of a sect, was the first to devise the notion of three subsistent entities, hypostases, in a work that he entitled On the Three Natures. 4. He devised the notion of three subsistent entities and three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It should be noted that the Nag Hammadi library Sethian text Trimorphic Protonoia identifies Gnosticism as professing Father, Son, and feminine wisdom Sophia, or as Professor John D. Turner denotes, God the Father, Sophia the Mother, and Logos the Son. Valentinus's detractors. Shortly after Valentinus' death, Irenaeus began his massive work on the detection and overthrow of the so-called Gnosis, better known as Adversus Heresies, with a highly colored and negative view of Valentinus and his teachings that occupies most of his first book.